Exploitation movies are always reinvented anyway. For every 5 years, there's a new way to get them out. So I think what will save it is TV. You know, TV increasingly has an interest in, and I'm talking about, you know, regular cable TV channels like Sci-Fi, USA, Spike. They have an increased interest in the culture of the exploitation movie.
Sci-Fi makes some amazing films.
Yeah, although these very directors that I've been referring to have been telling me that the last two sci-fi versus films tanked. And so they're worried now that sci-fi isn't going to order anymore because you know, maybe the end of that trend.
Do you have a favorite out of the sci-fi original movies, like the Sharktopus or Cyclops?
No, I like them all. I like the fact that they can like buy 3 minutes of CGI from a place in Bulgaria. You know, just like enough to show the Sharktopus swimming and then jumping out of the water one time and then one fight. You know, they can build a whole movie around that. You know.
Do we have any more questions?
Yep, got one up front there.
I could just talk all day, so I want to make sure that these people are getting.
Now this question, it's hard for me to ask without laughing, but I remember when you hosted King Kong 76, and just Jessica Lange's one-liners in that movie were priceless, and I'm wondering especially what you thought of when she explained how she was the all-American girl saved from the exploding yacht by Deep Throat.
You know, the scene is not vivid in my mind. But you know what I most remember about that movie is probably the finest moment of the World Trade Center, right? It's like I use the World Trade Center for that. Well, no. The greatest thing about that movie is when they were making it. Dino De Laurentiis gave my favorite quote of all time, which was he says, "When Monkey died, everybody cried." That was Dino De Laurentiis' explanation of why King Kong is a classic.
I think we've got another question out here. Yep.
Okay, when it comes to the infamous subject of remakes, and I know this is going to be hashed over and over and over, if there was a movie that you think should be remade, what would it be?
Well, I would say scour the 70s and early 80s for movies that failed as opposed to movies that were huge successes. Now, a guy that I know in Texas bought the rights to The Legend of Boggy Creek, which I thought was, like, why? Like, how can you match? First of all, The Legend of Boggy Creek is spectacularly bad. It's so spectacularly bad that it's good, you know. And I think that's the kind of movie you cannot remake. There's no way you can improve on that. There's no way you can get to the authenticity of the original Boggy Creek. But if someone were to from about 1969 to 1974, there were so many bad but interesting movies made that if you were to pick some of those plots and remake them, but you know, it's like, why be lazy? Why not just write a script? I mean, I formed one reason that we have so many bad movies is that there's no respect for the screenwriter. I formed a production company about a year ago and asked for horror scripts and got about 1,100 of them. And so, including many movies. And so there's no dearth of writing talent. What you have in many cases is you have writer, director, producers. And if they're good writers, they're bad directors. And if they're good directors, they're bad writers. And they shouldn't be doing all those jobs. That's too many hats. And so since there's no studio head, you tell them, no, you can't write this. You're a good director, but you can't write this. You got to work with this director, with this writer over here. Then we end up with like mediocre product because there's no like there's no Roger Corman guy. Roger's still around. Roger Corman is 85 years old though. I mean, he's not making that many movies anymore. So there's no Roger Corman guy saying, no, you work with him, you work with him, you work with him, to put the creative teams together. All of those really great campy movies of the 70s and 80s that everyone loves, they were extremely talented people that made them. Even in a film that today nobody watches much, like Screwballs, you know, in the dead genre of the youth sex comedy, you know. It was very well written, it was very well directed, it was very fun, it was very light, it was very well done, you know, and it was because all the people involved were very extremely talented young people that Roger Corman had found and put together in a team, you know, to make that movie. And that we don't have those guys anymore putting together the teams.
And this is going to be our last question. We're running short of time.
If you want to talk more, just come to the table, and I'll be here all night.
Speaking of the Corman era, the 60s and that era, what did you think of the old American International and the Hammer films?
Well, I love both of those. I love the American International films and the Hammer films. You know, two entirely different companies. I'll tell a quick Sam Arkoff story, okay? Sam Arkoff, like, right before the end of his life, I think he died in the, I want to say the early 90s, but somebody can look it up for me, late 80s, early 90s, maybe. But right before he died, he was at a party, and he saw a guy who had just had a success with a gay film, a gay-themed film about AIDS. And and Sam Arkoff like went over to him, and he has a cigar and everything, and this gay thing. He says, "Do you think it's big?" And he said, "Yeah, we did pretty well with it." He says, "I want to get into that." That's like 1 week before he dies. He's thinking, "Oh, I found the next new thing." You know, so that's what makes a great, you know, exploitation producer. So, and the Hammer films, a little bit different in that those. I don't understand exactly what the creative relationship was between the three guys at Hammer, but what I do know is that when they fell apart as a team, you know, Hammer fell apart, and people have been trying to put it back together. They're still trying to put it back together today, and you know, there's always been a Hammer. There's still a Hammer. It's never stopped existing, but it's like for the past 40 years they've been trying to recreate the magic of the late 50s and the 60s, and a little bit in the early 70s when they're making those lesbian-themed horror films, you know. But that seems like a meteor, you know, just like it happened. It was 15 years. It happened in an unlikely place, in England, you know, and then it was never to be repeated. Occasionally, a good horror film comes out of England, but they're rare. They're few and far between.
All right, well, I guess with that said, we have to be going, but it's been a thrill, so.
If you are a VIP member, please hold up your pass. You do not have to leave before the next group come in. Once again, as you're probably well aware, True Blood